Okay. Thank you all for coming to Z-Space's first civic conversation in this virtual world. My name is Jordan Battle. I'm Z-Space's Patron and Community Engagement Manager. Z-Space is working towards reaching out to our community more with these conversations. So we are so happy that you're here for this first one between board members about how they're endeavoring with their anti-racist efforts in the arts community. And we would be remiss not to start this off without a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to go ahead and read Z-Space's land acknowledgement. Z-Space holds itself accountable to the work of undoing oppression and advancing equity to overcome our country's bitter history of segregation and racial inequality. As part of that work, we must start by acknowledging that Z-Space resides on the ancestral and unceded land of San Francisco, California, the traditional land site of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribe. Since we are meeting virtually, we recognize that we are all on different unceded lands, and we pay respect to the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting. And we recognize those Native communities and extend our deepest gratitude to those who have stewarded this land and offer our respect to their elders, past, present, and future. I'm currently at Z-Space in the box office. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop the native land link. We're gonna leave the chat open briefly for folks to check in and just let us know what land that you are joining us from, that you are currently occupying. And while I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and ask Julius to come up. And Julius is our lovely moderator, and I'm gonna ask him to introduce himself for this evening.
Hi folks, my name is Julius Ria. My pronouns are he, him. I'm calling from Ohlone lands, Oakland. I'm really excited to be facilitating this discussion. I'm excited to be talking to these fantastic, brilliant like artists, admin, board members who I am just getting to know some of, and some I've watched and adored. And I'm just so excited for this conversation. And I'm also excited that all of y'all are going to be in on this. So like Jordan said, if you are still checking in, you know, use that chat, please use that chat. Also, please, as the discussion moves forward, ask us questions. You know, I'll be facilitating a discussion. I have some of my own questions for the panelists, and I know that some of the registrants also have included some of their questions, you know, while they registered for the event. So if there are any questions that you have that pop up during the discussion, throw them in the chat and we will try to get to it. And yeah, I'm just super excited. And I really want to doubly, triply thank all of our ASL interpreters for ensuring that everybody can be included on this conversation. And with that, I want to bring all of our panelists out. Come on, y'all, let's get it started. Oh my gosh, look at all these beautiful faces on this very, I was about to say like hot, because someone said it was like 80 degrees, but you know, who knows what the weather's gonna be like. But you know, whatever. But I will start off with introductions. I know I just introduced myself. We can popcorn it if you'd like. But some of our panelists will begin to introduce themselves, and then we are going to just dive straight into the conversation as much as we can. And just because you're the uppermost left on my screen at least, Becky, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Becky Davis. My pronouns are she, her, and I am representing Altarina Playhouse. I'm calling in from Muwekma lands, but our theater is located in Ohlone Muwekma, I'm so sorry, Chochenyo lands. And just real briefly, what we're doing these days is we're producing a variety of online content, both Zoom plays, which we try to do once a month, but we're keeping tickets free to make them as accessible to anybody as they can be. but just requesting donations from guests for whatever they feel is appropriate, that they are able or willing to contribute. We also do a free monthly play readers discussion, which is basically like a book club, but with plays. And we are also producing interviews that we're broadcasting on Zoom as well, with artists in our community called A Life in the Arts.
Thank you so much, Becky. Aldo, do you want to take it?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Aldo Billingslea. I use he, they pronouns. I am on the land of the Chochenyo-speaking Malekma Ohlone people in Santa Clara, and I am a member of the board for the Lorraine Hansberry Theater, but I'm here today to represent the Marin Theater Company, where I'm also a board member. Interesting fact, board member Brian Houghton said, here's one way to diversify boards. How about if I'm on the Marin board and I join the board of another theater that's BIPOC and ask one of their board members to join ours as well. So he did that. And then eventually I did that. And then he stopped being on the Marin board and he's just full-time on the Hansberry board. So he tricked me. So there's that. I will tell you that one of the things that's really exciting is that the Marin Theater Company, with the assistance of their resident playwright, Lauren Gunderson, they put on The Catastrophist, the play that she wrote about her husband. And it's a joint venture and it's doing really well. Some 40 some odd states and I think 10 countries have had viewership of that play. So I think that covers everything. If not, Julius, forgive me.
Aldo, never. Absolutely not. But thank you so much. DC, please, please, please.
Hi, I'm DC Scarpelli. I'm here. I'm he, his, him, he, him, his. And I'm on a lone land right now. I'm representing 42nd Street Moon. What we're doing right now, we've finished one streaming season and we're hot in preparation for another. And we have a few different weekly or bi-weekly or whenever weekly they happen, programs every week, 3 of them. And that's where we're sitting right now. Oh, and I'm on the board. I've been on the board for 5 years, and I'm also their resident graphic designer. And I pick up whatever work needs to be done.
As any true theater artist, a jack of all trades. Sharon, my love, please.
Hey, my name is Sharon Peng. I'm a board member at South Bay Musical Theater, which is on Muwekma Ohlone lands. I am calling in from a hotel in San Francisco, also Ohlone lands. And I have been a board member since this summer. Very interesting time to join in on a very deep level in the theater building community. I have since also been elected onto our community accountability or inclusion and accountability committee. So I'm a co-chair on that, mostly because CIA just sounds great when we say we're coming for you. And our program right now is all online, obviously. We started a thing called eStudio, and all of our programming is free because we're here to provide community and outreach. We're really trying to diversify who we have as part of the programming and facilitate a lot of conversations via stereotypes about stereotypes in theater, as well as providing workshops and auditions. And we also do readers theater. So we've done a couple of productions and really making a concerted effort to find material beyond the traditional works that are usually put on.
Oh my God, I love all of that. I love all of that. Mr. Lance Gardner, please, please, please.
Hello, I'm Lance Gardner. I am a board member at the Aurora Theater Company in Berkeley. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm currently on Ohlone land in what is now known as Palo Alto. I have been on the board at Aurora for just over a year, and the current offerings consist of a membership which includes 2 audio dramas, the second of which is going to be released relatively soon, and that will be The Bluest Eye, as well as some other interviews, salons, and online content. And next season's offerings are forthcoming and to be announced. Our work in the way of equity, diversity, inclusion, we have several names for it. Internally, we're calling it what is it? Confronting and dismantling oppression. And we have a board task force that's working on that in various ways to address specific demands as well as perceived needs of various communities. So I'm happy to talk more about that and happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. And last but certainly not least of our house that we are speaking from tonight, Alex, please.
Thanks, Julius. Hi, everyone. Really grateful to be here. My name is Alex Randall. I am representing Z-Space today, where I've been on the board there for the last year and a half. Z-Space is located on Ohlone land. I am calling in from San Francisco, California, which is also Ohlone land. He, his pronouns. And in terms of what Z-Space has been up to recently, we have been producing podcasts through our resident theater company, Word for Word. We are currently producing Play in a Box, which is a delivered to your home theater experience. And we are also hosting a residency for Kinetic Light Dance Company. I guess most relevant to today's conversation, we've also had since October an EDI and anti-racism working group that's been meeting every 2 to 4 weeks or so. And I've been more or less facilitating that process. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about that work today and getting to know the work of all these other great organizations. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Alex. All right, I need to like calm myself down because I'm like so excited to talk to all of you. The first thing that I really want to just like set up, the thing that I'm starting to learn about, the more deep that the conversations of boards with staff, with audiences, with communities, all of these discussions and all these bodies are really like coming together. However, we know, you know, I know that boards actually have historically had a range of different roles. Sometimes boards are more financially focused or focused on funding. Some are focused on community organization or connecting with the audience. Some are kind of focused more on organization, like organizational practices. And I know, and now by, I mean, not necessarily adding, but ensuring that we are, how do I say this? Blending all of these discussions together and then adding the urgency of EDI developments. And I just have one question of what barriers, honestly, barriers are you facing right now at your own organizations, trying to blend all of these different discussions together by also having this, not umbrella, but, you know, understanding that the discussions that you have about community engagement, for example, also has a bent for making sure that there are diverse voices inside of the room and making sure that the art is inherently informed by these diverse voices. So I just, it seems basic to me, but it's actually quite deep, you know, and I wanted to start off with Becky, if possible, because I was really interested in seeing like not the change, but I know that I've watched and been a fan of Altarina before, but it's also very interesting, not pivot, but change of like really blending the work to focus on community involvement and engagement. So yeah, I wanted to start off with you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and that's a great question, and that's actually where a lot of my focus is at the moment. I joined the board in September, October of 2019, voted into president in December, and started on January 1st of 2020. So my first year has been full of a lot of changes, but the most challenging thing that we're facing right now is the fact that we're down 3 board members. And we also don't have a very clear delineation between these responsibilities that you're talking about between our staff and the board. And so my focus right now is honestly on making what is called a RACI chart, RASCI, which basically breaks down all of the different types of responsibilities within an organization and identifying who's responsible, accountable, who supports the issue, who or whatever's being done, who's consulted, and who's informed. And it's what I use in my job when I was doing process guide development. And it is a really useful tool for determining and clarifying these roles and responsibilities and how we interact and how these conversations happen. And then I can my vision, right, is to have one board member for each of these kinds of focal areas, and that each board member is responsible for a tasking, like a working group, or that they create a working group and from the people within our community, whether they be artists or guests, and relay that information back to the board about what these people are saying and what the feedback is. And then let the board have the discussions and make the decisions that we need to make. But these are all my objectives. And then once I get these roles clearly defined, then I can find the right person to fill those gaps that we have. And that's where I'm hoping we're going to add some more diversity to our board and skill sets and backgrounds. And it's an evolving process. It's not going very quickly, but I did get some counseling from somebody that has done this. And she runs a nonprofit organization now. I'm blanking on her name and what the name of the organization is, but they focus on diversity and inclusion at that particular nonprofit, and I'm blanking. I will look up the name, but she was very helpful and reaffirmed that this is a good starting point and that establishing these roles is really critical for making sure that these conversations are happening in sync and that we're making good progress. Did that answer your question?
Oh my gosh, completely. I just want to like open it up a little bit more to like everyone else, because you just brought up like, honestly, like 16 million different points. Truly. But you brought up, oh gosh, you brought up the fact that on top of potential staff, not staff, but specifically board turnover that we're kind of seeing throughout a lot of arts industries, not just theater. On top of that, you're saying that, oh my gosh, I love the fact that you are tackling a problem and trying to see it from multiple angles, ensuring that everybody has responsibility and ownership over one specific area. And as a team collectively, you can kind of address the issues. I wonder, does anybody else, any of the other panelists, are you tackling all these issues kind of in a similar way, where it's like, hey, we have to have 6 conversations at once. Let's try to have one person handle each one? Or is it more kind of like let's just try to have these general discussions and then try to figure out how the staff kind of works with us, or anything else? And I wanted to ask Lance or kind of shift over that focus to Lance, because I really, really adore, like, especially all of the interviews that Aurora has been doing, and especially the fact that this wave seems to be really, God, transformative. So I wanted to ask Lance, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm like looking at DC's cap. Lance, I wanted to switch that over to you and kind of see like, how are you handling some of these shifts and some of these like multi-layered conversations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's a conversation that we're having. You know, we've been having conversations about, well, you mentioned, you know, the way that different boards work differently. And we've been having conversations about what's institutional versus what's organizational, right? What requires a board vote, what doesn't, you know, and how does EDI or CDO or anti-racism fit into that, right? If we're going to go out with a public statement saying that we're anti-racist, do we have to vote on that? Is that a thing that that everybody has to agree to? And the answer is maybe, maybe not, depending on what the implications are. And I think in you know, in a theater, a nonprofit theater, where the model relies not just on individual and institutional funding, but has become reliant on board funding as well. It's a stickier question, and the question of who you're serving becomes a little bit muddier. And so, you know, the answer to that is I don't think we've come to an answer yet. You know, I've been with Aurora for a year, and we've been talking about this stuff a good portion of that time, but you know, we're just now coming to trying to integrate the financial conversations with the anti-racist conversations, right? Because some of this work you can make a statement, you can make commitments, you can make choices in who you are hiring, but some of it, a lot of it costs money, right? And a lot of that is money going to people, right? If you're going to invite historically marginalized groups into your space intentionally, the intention should not be to underpay them, right? Or to subject them to wages that won't allow them to live. If you're going to provide services like counseling and bystander intervention training, there are people behind those things who also need to be paid. And so, you know, we're just starting the work of talking about, where does that money come from? Which of these things is institutional and should be handled on the board level, and which of them are organizational, where, you know, where the administration is taking the lead and maybe coming to the board for additional guidance, but not asking for approval or a vote. And I'd be interested to hear, you know, what anybody else has found if they've had these similar conversations.
Well, let's ask. Let's specifically ask that question. And I think that this is also something important to note about this discussion, because when entering it, I was like, okay, I'm ready to like interview these folks and like ask them these tough questions. And actually, no, that's not what this conversation is for. It's more to kind of like get these barriers out inside of our own individual organizations so that we can kind of figure out like, hey, I have an issue with this. Is there any way that you at your organization might have the tools? So I understand, Lance, that, you know, once again, the kind of boat that we're all in is that the urgency to solve and rectify and create justice and equitable solutions is like dire, but also it takes so much time to A, do the training, B, find the funding for these new efforts, and then C, to really integrate the community inside of these discussions externally, internally, and then try to then figure out, you know, what is institutional, what's organizational, like what's the board, what's the staff, and then it's a lot of like listening and processing that, you know, and it's not like we've had to deal with like a pandemic and a social uprising over the past year. I don't know what you're talking about. But I would like to ask, honestly, because I'm really, really interested from DC and Sharon, like having two companies that are focused on producing music theater. I know that many of the companies have worked with music. Z-Space does a lot of different stuff. I know that Alt Arena does musicals and a whole bunch of things. But I wonder, even with the content of the artistic work, is anything vastly, vastly different from some of these other barriers that like Becky's bringing up, Lance is bringing up with your organizations? DC, do you want to start off?
Sure. And there definitely are barriers. For us, our past is probably one of the biggest barriers. Like 42nd Street Moon was started as the company that does forgotten musicals, and all from the golden age of Broadway, which was dominated by white everything. Yes, from the creative side to the stage. And if there were but BIMPOC people represented, it was usually in a very insular way, you know. And that's a problem because that's how Moon started as an organization too. For what, 20 years, it was a very, very, very white place. And the board is a very, very old white male institution. Or at least it was when the new executive director started about 6 years ago. And it's been in a really strange, painful adolescence since then, with a lot of us trying to move it forward, the organizational folk, the folk on the ground, and the folk who've been around for a quarter of a century, not necessarily getting why it has to happen. And it wasn't until the events of the last year, year and a half, that their eyes started to open to this. In terms of what we're doing, the staff is sort of gung-ho to move forward and take action. And there's resistance. I wouldn't say it's active resistance. It's very passive resistance. It's just inertia on the part of a lot of our existing structures. And that's really, really frustrating. I started our, what was then called diversity committee 2.5 years ago, something like that. And the idea was, what? Diversity committee? And it kind of was that until the social upheaval of the last couple of years. And now we're finally, the board as a whole is finally waking up to the need for a lot of fundamental changes. And happily, we have directors on the staff side that are trying to push those forward. And we are getting systemic changes finally. And they're just starting to inch forward.
And that's something really interesting. I apologize, Sharon. I want and need to talk to you, but like I have to respond to this really quickly. Because you said, as opposed to some of the other panelists, you said that you've been on your board for 5 years, correct?
Yes.
So that means that you have even been trying to discuss this work of equity and diversity and inclusion before 2020, correct?
Yeah.
So I just want to see, and I think Aldo, you may have also some experience with this as well. I'm trying to paint a picture, but I wonder what has that been like, not just obviously like dealing with the resistance, but what kind of advice can you give, especially to the organizations who are just meeting that first levels of resistance over the past year, and especially like, not trying to point out you, Lance, but I think it's interesting also that we're seeing kind of a wave of new board members over the past year who then come on, and because of, maybe their race or ethnicity or their background or their energies, they're kind of like asked to say like, okay, great, you will be helping us like make these equity pushes. So I just wonder like what advice you have to give to people, even potentially new board members who are now facing these kind of like resistances with their boards and their communities.
I would love to jump in on that, but let's go ahead and hear from Sharon first, and then I think that once we address the musical theater issues and what's inherent in there, then I can jump in.
Because it is all happening. DC, Sharon, love it. Sharon, yes, I need to make the floor for you, but I'm just prepping y'all. but this is where we're going. Sharon, please, my love. Thank you so much, Aldo.
Thank you so much, Aldo. I'm going to agree with the notion that musical theater is traditionally very problematic in multiple ways. And South Bay Musical Theater, that is part of something that we're really contending with as we plan for reopening, which we have an opening committee. Actually, our board is broken up into several committees. We have the Development and Fundraising Committee, Organizational Development, Vision and Planning, and then Community Inclusivity and Accountability. And we try to be as fluid as possible between all of these portions. And part of Vision and Planning is to look at new content and really read them for who the writers are and how they represent underrepresented people. And so where we're at right now is how do we contend with the history of a lot of these old works? And where we're at is we have decided that until things are rewritten to be more equitable, or that rights houses allow us to do changes, there's no reason to put on those shows, right? And we're also facing a history of past aggressions that fortunately over the past years since Sarah Dean became our executive producer and really made a concerted effort to remove people who have been extremely resistant to change. And that is core to our organization. And that's something we really discussed about when I joined. And the reason I was able to join actually was over in June, I believe, the board came out with a list of initiatives to change themselves, right? And one of them was that they needed to shift their own representation. So several white members of the board took it upon themselves to not run again and to go out and find people in their community who represented the community who weren't white, right? Who were queer, who were BIPOC. And of course, when they first reached out to me, I was like, oh, this is a little bit performative. But what happened was that several people reached out to me without knowing that other people reached out. And then we actually had, when they voted, more people of BIPOC backgrounds than seats that were open, right? So that means that they really went out and searched. And then the Community Inclusion Accountability Committee had a discussion about whether or not we wanted to come out and make a statement about what we were doing, which we can get into later. There's like a whole list of stuff that we've been doing. But we decided that it is absolutely vital that change comes from the inside. And if the work works, it's natural, it happens. It's integrated. And that's why we never came out and say like, oh, we're doing this and this, because it looks like a checklist, right? And we want change to be like, and I know I just said it, if the work works, it works. And you will see it from the outside, and you'll see other people referencing us, and you'll see other communities come to us, and you'll see our casting metrics grow, and the community will come to you if you reach for the community. And also part of that is the Community Inclusivity and Accountability Board has a representative in each of the other committees to make sure that this is not just one committee, that this becomes a global company effort. And I do also want to address that, yes, sometimes board members there are frictions. And it's not that they're ill-intentioned, is that they're unaware of their microaggressions, right? And we did have a talk back between my committee and the board on how to decentralize, because that is the biggest problem that people have, is that they don't understand that saying things like, oh, well, you know, inclusivity is, and like diversity is really important to our company, but at the end we're a business, right? And that's like a false dichotomy. That's like, you can't, both can exist at the same time, you guys, especially since like inclusivity by definition is expanding your market. You know, it's calling more people to you. And so just really teaching the board to be mindful of that, and also just teaching kindness, right? And I'm going to be like fully open here that there were extreme contentions between some board members that we had to facilitate, and what it came down to was that you need to just allow for growth. And we're not saying that that's an excuse. We're saying that as long as you're open, change can happen. You just have to be willing to listen, because we all don't know the answers to everything. We just need to be willing to listen to the people who do. And to bring this back to musical theater, sorry, this is so long. Bringing this back to musical theater, seeing shows like Thoroughly Modern Millie, which yes, we did put on, and that was a mistake. And you know, other shows, like we were saying, like this was beautifully written except for these pieces. How can we rewrite these pieces? And what it comes down to is, do we need to rewrite these pieces? Why don't we use that energy towards finding other work that is underrepresented and put those on, right? And because we find that, you know, some communities don't like this work for very legit reasons, and then some communities really like this work for also legitimate reasons, and they're fighting. And both of them are right, but we also don't need to be fighting, because there's other things we can spend this energy on. And that's what it comes down to, is that we're having these discussions, but we don't need to burn so much energies on things that that don't hold value anymore, right? So bringing this back to musical theater, that's why we're trying right now to spend a lot of energy in finding work that can be cast diversely, that isn't problematic, that or is problematic in ways that we can create other programming around it, right? Because we're virtual. And part of our reopening plan is having shows that are consciously cast, and then creating programming that also feeds back into that. So there's education beyond the stage. Because right now we're growing ourselves, and then we also have the responsibility to grow the community. And by some way or another, the audience who comes is going to be able to take that into their communities, and that's how we change the world.
Sharon, there's a reason why several board members wanted you in there, because you're that good, and because you're busy. I won't try to get you on our board. Yes, taking this back to Lance and the issue of how many committees does this have to go through so we can state that we want an anti-racist organization is, it's a great question. The African proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And if you look at any organization that operates by Robert's Rules of Order, it was not meant to go fast. It's not designed that way. And so that's one of the things that need to happen is that the theater needs to empower someone to say, this one we can take quickly. We have things we do when we're in crisis that allow us to circumvent some of those processes that can drag things down. And sometimes saying we support the Asian community and anti-Asian violence is wrong. doesn't really need to go through a bunch of committees so everybody can feel good about saying, I support this, and it takes 3 days to get it up. So there's that. The tension, and we do theater, we need some tension. There's going to be some tension. Inherent in what we do, there is tension. And if I come onto a board that is saying, hey, we've decided we need to diversify our board, and that's why 6 theaters called me in the last year to join their boards, was because they needed someone. And it's nice to be thought of. It's also a little depressing to think they think I'm the only one, and there's that. So when I go onto that board and I find out that there are people there who shockingly don't think exactly like I do, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it brings that perspective, that we don't agree, that we are at odds is not necessarily a terrible thing. That we don't listen, then we do have problems. Then we don't want to change, past the point of we're human beings and change is scary for us, and we're a little bit afraid of getting out of our comfort zone. But between the comfort zone and the panic zone is the learning zone, and that's where the theater needs to live. And so for us to go just a couple of steps outside of that comfort zone before we realize, oh, I can still breathe here. We're still good. We can go a little further, and we can push those things and open that up. That's what inclusivity is all about. And the more we do it, the better I think that we'll get. I think that's enough probably for now. The one thing I will add is that when you do, and if you do encounter that resistance that is unwilling to move, that refuses to see a new perspective, acknowledge, or to shift in its behavior, or their behavior in any way, that's different. So what you want to do is do the work so you can bring everybody along. But if you can't, some people you might have to say, you can't come along this path with us. It's better for you to go along on another path on your own, and to let those people go, because you can't spend all of your energy. It's a vital, vital resource of any organization, but particularly theaters. Spending all of that energy and time focused on or a couple of individuals who don't like the direction that the theater is going, when the theater needs to move in this new direction. And had they been doing that, DC was saying, 5 years ago he joined, and 2 years ago they were forming a diversity committee. If those theaters had done diversity training then, it would have been a lot cheaper, because after death of George Floyd, that work is a lot more expensive, because people now realize it's necessary. And so, the fact that for me, that Marin is investing in that training at this time says a lot about the theater's priorities, that they realize that it's vital and it's going to be worthwhile to help them go where they need to go.
Ooh, Aldo. I needed a sip of water after DC, and then Sharon took the mic, and then Aldo, and I was like, ooh, babe. But Aldo, you do bring up a really good point about training. And I kind of wanted to just ask Alex, because you had mentioned that Z Space is going through this training, and because I mean, words. But Alex, can you talk a little bit more about the training that's been happening for the staff and also potentially the board at Z Space?
Sure. Thanks, Julius. And I'm just sitting here feeling so grateful to be with all of you and to be absorbing everything that you all have been sharing so far. I'm shaking a little. Okay, so training that we've been doing at Z-Space, we, through a grant with the Hewlett Foundation, we had the privilege of having Art Equity facilitate trainings for our full board and staff, including on our on-call staff. We had 2 half-day sessions with them in December, and then 2 half-day sessions with them this month, all focused on anti-racism. And I think for us, it was a really important training for us, first of all, to include as many people from the Z-Space community as we could in it. We didn't want it to just be the board or just be the board and full-time staff, because the work that we do impacts far more people than that and involves far more people than that. And I think it was important to us to cast a wide net in terms of who all participated in that training. And I think it was exceedingly eye-opening for us. Thinking back on what the last year has been like for Z-Space, I think in the wake of George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder and all of the other Black lives that we lost last year, we had the living document and the We See You White American Theater demands be offered to the white theater community. And I think that prompted an initial reckoning for us at Z-Space of looking at these demands. Which of these are we feeling resistant to and why? And it caused us to really have to think through where we could be improving ourselves and making Z-Space a safe and supportive space for our BIPOC artists and art workers. And I think the training, we made some progress, I think, over the first couple months after we got the working group started. I think the training prompted our second reckoning, where we realized that while we had started taking some actions to try to make Z-Space more inclusive, like removing the give or get requirement from our board member job description, or creating a feedback process for people in the middle of a production if they have an experience that is harmful, having someone they can report it to. I think that what the training showed us was that before we can really commit ourselves to being actively anti-racist, we have to figure out how we're still being racist. What are the policies and the systems and the practices that we have in place that are actively harming BIPOC artists and arts administrators in our space? Because bringing the whole Z-Space community together for these trainings created a space for our BIPOC community members to voice the harm that they had had. And it was, I can't imagine what it was like for them to share their stories with us. All I know is that it had us realizing that we've got a lot of work to do. And so I guess this is all to say that if you at your organization have an opportunity to take dedicated time to bring in a lot of people connected to your organization and talk about anti-racism, do it and be ready, because it's probably going to rock your whole group, particularly the white people.
Oh my gosh, I love that. But you also bring up something, a follow-up question that I have for everybody else is that not everybody may have access to the training. Do you know what I mean? So, and not just the training organizationally, but potentially the training also personally. Not everybody even has access to, like be in a therapy session and work through all of their anti-racist stuff for themselves. So, and Becky, and you read my mind, because I was just about to bring it back. Becky, come on.
I just wanted to say that, and it's old, so I'm pretty sure it's still up though, because I was just looking at the website the other day, but a friend of mine had forwarded me a free resource for implicit bias training. And it was produced by one of the Cal locations. I will look it up and I'll put the link in the chat because I have it in my email, because I sent it to my board saying, I think we should all do these. There's 6 different modules, and it was a free resource that's available to people. So even if you can't get somebody to come in and look at your processes or your policies that you have in place, or to consult with you on your specific circumstance, this is a good starting place. And it's valuable because I think, and I've been through implicit bias training for my day job. And I just remember being, over the last few years, the more research I do into this, the more I realize how many implicit biases I have and how it impacts the things that I say or how I interact with people. And I'm constantly working on that as an individual. And I think that's something that is a great starting point for boards, because without the awareness of what implicit bias is, it's really hard to recognize what systems you have in place that are oppressing people of color. And I think it's just really something valuable that people should look into. So I'm going to look up that link and put it in the chat.
I will say that, again, when you're a BIPOC person, you're on a board, you're involved in an organization. I do not think that I'm the only one that runs a test every now and then, going, wait, am I in the right place? Is this where I need to be spending my time, and those sorts of things. You do that from time to time to see, are you on track, or should you be somewhere else? Would you be more valuable somewhere else? And one of those things that let me know that I was at the right place with Marin was, not only were they lining up also art equity to do some of the training that they wanted, but they asked me to do some initial training to get them ready for the training, because they knew that even that was necessary. And that there was, and I don't think that this is unique from Marin, but there was a bit of distance between the staff experience with an issue and the board experience with an issue. And I think, I see the heads nodding, and I think that particularly when you think about just box office in particular, those are people who are on your front lines that are interacting with the patrons, who know firsthand how those patrons are receiving or dealing with some of the issues of the material that they're watching, the material that they're receiving in the mail, the changes that are happening at the theater. And so being able to listen and find the bridges between those groups is really helpful. And the other thing that's happened at Marin is it's lost 2/3 of its staff because of the pandemic. And board members, sometimes you have a funding board and then you have a working board. Right now, Marin has a hard working board because they've had to step into some of those positions and fill in and have a much better perspective on what's happening there. So there is that. It was a move from necessity, but it's actually helped bring some clarity, and hopefully will bring some more understanding. The other thing that happened at Marin that was helpful for me was when they hired their associate artistic director, they brought in a person who was BIPOC. And for those of you who already know, Nakisa Etamad is amazing, an amazing person. She's of Middle Eastern descent, and I know everybody here is already aware that people from the Middle East, that they are BIPOC, but sometimes it bears reminding. So.
Sorry, Sharon, go ahead. Go.
Jump in here just to that the point about the patronage is so important, because often we hear that, we can't put on this or that production, or we can't cast this or that way because our patrons won't accept it. And that is so not true, right? Because if the people making those arguments are still believing that it's mostly the established white people who spend money to come to the arts. Whereas what really is happening is that our communities have changed since then significantly. Like minorities, I hate using the word minorities because they're not minorities, right? We're just, it's our communities are so much more diverse now, just by default, by nature, by the mixing pot that is America and the world, honestly. And if your patronage is only white people who accept traditional casting, then you really need to, well, regardless, you need to really look at your community, look at how many percentages of like whatever group lives in your community, in your audience, and why aren't they in your audience? What aren't you doing to captivate them? My thing is, if they're not coming, it's not because they don't have money to spend, because that's a whole nother terrible thing to assume. It's because you're not reaching out to them. It's because your company isn't offering something for them. And if you really want to be a moving force in art, to create art that is reflective of humanity, you need to be there. You need to be aware of that. And so for us, I'm oversight over for our finance and fundraising committee, and it's not that people of color don't want to come see shows, aren't involved in the arts. It's that there's a white supremacist notion that like highbrow art, it just reinforces that idea that art is for white people because it's written by white people. We see white people on stage, and not just that, but like men and straight people, and like this whole thing. And that's just not the case. They're there. They crave the arts because this is how theater is how humans have discussion about how to develop. It's how we learn from each other and learn from each other's experiences and share. And so bringing back also, so saying that our patronage won't accept changes is wrong. The ship has sailed, right? No, especially over the course of this summer. If you think that our communities are mostly white people, sorry, you're part of the problem. So that I just wanted to bring up that point.
No, you literally took the question out of my mouth because I was literally going to ask everybody, like about that conflict that you just brought up of like audience engagement versus audience education about the changes that are happening organization and institutionally. And I love, Sharon, and this goes back to exactly what you said before, that it was like, make it and they will come, talk to them and they will come. Like the doors are, that you can open up the doors and everything will essentially solve itself the more that you just open the doors actively. Oh my gosh. Also, I wanted to ask everybody, the big thing that's not the elephant in the room, but the big thing that we also are talking about here is finances, because we're looking at, I guess the question that I have for everybody is like, what are you looking into, even ideas to kind of broaden or widen the financial possibilities for stabilizing yourselves in the future? Yeah, that's because that's the question. Does anybody have?
Just to talk about that in just 1 second, but I do want to say, again, if you go to any website and you look at the about page where it's like directions or who we are or whatever, the number one thing on the about page from Marin Theater Company is accountability. And then you can look right there and find out what their 90-day report out is yes, there you go. So so you can see the progress and making sure that the patrons are able to find what that progress is and to keep them in the loop is important. Trying to figure out new revenue streams is one of the discussions that the board had for us just the last 2 weekends. Spending 3.5 hours with your best friends, trying to come up with some good solutions for the theater, and one of them for us is realizing that the streamed show, the online show, for some people, it's not as good as live theater. Of course not. Neither is this conversation, but it's still meaningful. It's still impactful. It's still having some people snap here on screen and for the audience. So being able to open that up is something that I think is really important because I don't think it's going away. So there's that.
Becky, please.
I wanted to speak to the first part that you were talking about, which was the conflict between essentially, I hate to phrase it this way, but like pandering to your audience and like not wanting to upset people. But I mean, call it what it is. That's basically what we're talking about, right? And a couple of things. One, someone who actually works at Moon now had mentioned to me one time on BART when we were commuting together, you have to give your audience something they want, something they need, and something that they're gonna like. And when he was talking about what they need, it's about like the expanding their horizons a little bit more, something that's a little bit outside their comfort zone, that is going to open their perspectives a little bit, and make them kind of challenge some of the thoughts that they've had about groups of individuals or so anyway, I think that's a really important thing, and I think that's something that I had discussed with our artistic director a while ago when I first took on as president. She said, "Oh yes, absolutely. You always try to push the envelope a little bit." And also, I wanted to say that I think for me personally, it's really important that the audience that we cultivate reflects the values of our organization. And that if somebody has a problem with us doing a Zoom play about gay marriage, okay, fine, don't come. You know, we are pro LGBTQ and supportive of our brothers and sisters and non-binary folks that, identify in that demographic. And if you have a problem with, and this is kind of like a personal belief of mine, like if you and I don't see eye to eye on this, like we don't have to be friends on a personal level, but like in a professional level, like you create the culture that you embody. And this is more about like walking the walk instead of just talking the talk. And you want to bring in the people whose values align with your organization. And if they don't align, then, my personal opinion is like, that's fine, take your money elsewhere. That's okay. Lights has his hand up.
Lance, go.
See, I wonder about that because I get concerned that the pushing out of the staunch racist, those people still exist in the world. They're still Americans, and maybe if they're creating a problem in the theater for the audience and
it's not like they're banned.
Artists. No, but I'm saying that eliminating them from the conversation, I think sometimes like those are the people who you want to influence the most. I think who will make the biggest change if you can change their minds, if you can reach them in some way, and maybe theater is not the way to do it, right? Maybe that's not going to happen in that space. But I think about this both in terms of audience members and in terms of board members, right? The biggest impact you can have is flipping one of those people to the other side, or at least edging them a little bit closer. And so I personally, I think a lot about incentive, right? I think as human beings, we seek out incentive in all ways. And so I'm always wondering, where is the incentive, right? If you have a group of old white men on a board who are the primary funders of the theater and who are making the decisions for the theater and who are attending the theater, they've created something for themselves, and they don't have an incentive to stick around if you say, you're out of here, we're not interested in you, right? We don't want to keep the old ways, but I don't think we want to push people out without giving them the opportunity to incentivize this kind of change, because the harm that's done is done to to people of color, to women, to trans non-binary people, and so like there's an incentive for us to change things. There's no incentive for the old rich white guy to make a change if he can just take his money and go elsewhere. So I want to ask a little bit harder in general, work a little bit harder to figure out where it's not about a meeting place. It's not about, there are good people on both sides. It's really about, maybe I have to incentivize this guy to get my incentive. And maybe, you know, maybe that's how the change is made. And it can be, I think it can be dangerous. It can be, it can feel cold to take the emotion out of it. And it can feel dirty to talk about incentives, but I think it's an acknowledgement of a human, if not a need, a fundamental human desire that can't be ignored. So I think it's dangerous to push people out.
I just want to say, I think that's really a valid point. And I'm sorry, I forgot that in a lot of places, board members are responsible for providing some of the funding, because at Altarina, there's no give get for our board members. But we're all responsible for like helping bring in money. So I forget about that being a part of an equation for a lot of people.
And I think I'm talking about audience too. You know, I recall a time when I was on stage in a play, and somebody who was working backstage, their father, who was an immigrant from an Eastern European country, came to see the show, and the show had themes of slavery, and he saw the show and told his and told this person, you know, now I understand Black people in America, right? There was just that one piece missing, and you know, and we were able to provide that piece. And up until that time, who knows what was in his head? You know, why are they always complaining? Why do they want this? Why do they want that? But we were able to give them that one little piece. And I think if you leave the door open that much, that there can be there's real opportunity for change.
DC, I was about to ask a follow-up, but DC, go for it. You're on mute, my love.
So sorry. I just wanted to say that I don't know what your experience is, Sharon, but I think a lot of the time with musical theater audiences, it's not active resistance, it's just inertia, it's just laziness of thought, of whatever, because musicals, I think more than any other theatrical form, they're tired businessman events, you know, like in the, that was the phrase, right? This is a tired businessman musical. You've worked all day and you just want to relax and see people kick. And that's been changing for a long time. But for our audiences, especially our audiences, like our historical audiences, this was a place where you could just go see feel-good pablum that fed into the whole society that they were a part of and all the ideas they already had. And they could go home and feel really nifty about being who they were and thinking what they thought, if they thought at all. And I think that prodding them just to have a reaction that's conflicting a little bit, that just getting them, as we've been saying, out of their comfort zone a bit, is a huge step for a place that's been steeped in that kind of old-fashionedness, that kind of stodginess. That's what we're heading for. I hope so.
Sharon, did you want to speak to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally agree that musical theater is an art form that allows for laziness in mind, because it involves more than just, I'm not just acting, but you know, more elements, right? So people are like, this is important because of the music or because of the choreography, right? Just one thing I really want to point out is that language affects mental awareness. And in order to affect change, we need to internalize by shifting thought processes around topics. And that's what changes thought and action and growth. And then to Aldo's point is that there will be missteps, and we do need to find the people who exist in the gray zone. And to be fair, everyone exists in the gray zone. And we talked about this with boards, with people who aren't quite sure how to approach these subjects. And it's not that we're racist and not racist, right? It's that everyone exists somewhere along the way because of our implicit biases. And what's important is shifting the gauge, right? And it's finding those people who are a little off center and then pushes them towards decentralization, to greater mind growth, to being open to other people. DC, did you want to add to that?
Oh, I just wanted to share the tiniest little anecdote on this subject because I just remembered it. My father was one of those, he wasn't a businessman, but he was one of those tired businessmen who went to see musicals, you know, to be distracted. And way back in 1980, 85, he went to see La Cage aux Folles on Broadway. And he came back and he had the cast album, hooray. And he saw me looking at it. I was like, 9 or 10. And he was like, this play is about two men who are married. But it's okay because one of them is basically a woman. And and that was like so backward, but it was also a step, you know? And for me, that didn't just make his mind open a little bit. It helped me a lot as a kid who was the son of the guy in the audience. So there's that too.
I have an anecdote that also sort of adds to that. Sometimes the language is in things that are unsaid, right? So I've done Hairspray, count 3 or 4 times now. And the last time I did it was at a high school, and we got feedback from the mother of I think a 7-year-old trans boy who wrote in and said that his favorite character was Edna. And his mother said it wasn't because, you know, the character was fun. I mean, the character was fun and all that in the story, but he loved Edna because we played it traditionally with a man playing Edna, and he loved it because it was never discussed. And he said, that's the world I want to live in. That is the world I want to live in, where we never hit it and no one talked about it and the show went on. And it's amazing to me that there's shows I've done over and over and over, and every time you find something new. And that's magical theater.
Mic drop, honestly. Because if I may respond to that, I love what everybody's talking about is that, you know, we can change the policies and we can teach, but naturally, like even Lance responding to what you were saying earlier, it seems like a lot of people have commented on the fact that the change will come naturally if the art is more informed, if the artists are, you know, creating more inclusive spaces and kind of like a ripple effect. People will get more comfortable with narratives and with people that they may not have access to or they don't know about. And like you're saying, Sharon, like that magic of theater, that magic of experiencing something, you know, in front of you that may change your mind, or experiencing something in front of you with somebody else next to you. And together your minds can change and evolve. So I just wanted to ask maybe a final question, I'm not sure, is like, where have all of you felt really fulfilled or kind of inside of this work? Or alternatively, where have you been working on side of these like EDI efforts or stuff on your board, like to Aldo's point earlier, where it kind of clicked and you're like, oh, this is where we need to be going. This is what I need to be doing.
I was in a meeting not long ago. It may have been over the retreat, and different things were being discussed. And there was one board member who is usually pretty quiet. He's a white male, and he's older than I am by probably at least a decade or so. And he wanted to make a point, and so his point was about pushing forward with diversity. It was about pushing forward with opening up to new markets and doing things online. It was such a progressive statement by a person that I had a bias to expect him to be more conservative and reserved. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, yes, this is right. Good. I'm getting a little bit of an education. At the same time, I'm getting the goosebumps, and so I get all the feels, and that's a great thing. That's a great thing.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else like have an anecdote or kind of a click, an aha moment, if you will? Looking at you. Yeah, Sharon.
I'll go.
Sharon, then Alex, go for it.
It's really heartening to see where change or awareness arrive where you least expect it. And one of the places is we have engaged a consultant for our fundraising committee. And, I sit in just to make sure that they're going about it in a conscientious manner. But I was, I voted in having an advisor, but I didn't choose him. And it was really interesting to me that part of his advising includes just throwing the system out the window because it's classist, right? He was like, what if we do away with tiered, like you give so much money and you get so many things back? Because we were trying to figure out like, how do we deal with donors? And he says, okay, well, if you can't figure out a tier system, just throw it out the window. And we were like, well, you just told us that that's not the way to do it. And he's like, yeah, but like, that's the traditional way to do it. And I can't tell you that not to do it the other way. I can't tell you to just get rid of the class system because there just simply hasn't been research on it. And if that is what your company believes in, then do that. And it's just really incredible to meet people who are like, okay, just change the system. And that's what we should do, change the system. So little things like that make it evident that the culture is changing, and that people have awareness, and that it's not just in spaces of like EDI, right? It's like beyond that. And that means that the society is growing.
Oh, yes. Alex, please.
I think that I mentioned that we've had this working group going. It's a group of board and staff members that have been meeting together every 2 to 4 weeks or so since last fall. And I think what keeps me fulfilled and motivated is the fact that our board and staff keep showing up to this and being there for the conversations and making time out of their lives and jobs to participate. And I think one thing I've heard a lot from talking to other staff at art organizations is that they struggle to have their board go from being spectators to participants in this work. And I think I've been, my hope is renewed every time I get on a phone call with this group of board members and the staff members from ZSpace who are engaged in this work and are committed to it. We don't always know how productive each conversation is going to be, but we're showing up for it, and we're all there to try to make Z a safer space for our BIPOC colleagues. And so that, I think, that gives me hope. And also to see that our staff, like the civic conversation was not a board idea. This was a staff idea. And here we are having this really great conversation. And so to see some of the things that we've, ideas that have come up from the staff where we've just kind of signed off on it as a board, our staff is really inspiring me.
Yes. Lance, go for it.
I'm a pessimist. I don't I don't find joy in this work. I think that it's necessary, and when George Floyd was murdered, I got phone calls, but before that I got phone, like every time something bad happens to Black people, I get phone calls. looking for my opinion or my involvement, and I think that's bullshit. I mean, it's not bullshit because I'm here for it, but I was here for it all along. You know, I remember taking an implicit bias test online like 20 years ago when it was called automatic preference, and you know, and I've been thinking about it since then, and every time somebody brings it up like it's some kind of new thing, I get I don't know, my face gets hot. So yeah, the thing that keeps me going is that I'm right now I'm the only one who looks like me on my board, and you know, and we're trying to change that, and the board is involved and willing to change that, but you know, but it's problematic because who the hell am I, right? I'm one guy, and like, you know, like Sharon's anecdote about hairspray, everybody just wants to be normal. Everybody, like, we want to define our own individuality, and so that's not going to happen in my lifetime. The normalization of any current out group. So the thing that keeps me going is my frustration and commitment to be there when those phone calls come in.
I would say that I also don't necessarily take joy in doing the work, but I know it's necessary. I would say also that I feel some part of me feels good when making order out of chaos. And right now I feel like there's so many things that have to get done. And I'm a little overwhelmed with that because we have so far to go. But on like a very, very tiny level, like when I cross something off my checklist or I say, you know, I've accomplished this objective, that to me is the satisfying thing, to say that I'm making progress. And so I really like that. And also I'm really deeply committed to the theater that I represent, because I met my current husband there. Like he's now my husband. We started dating when we got cast in a show as newlyweds together, and we got married there. And it's a very, very special place in my heart. And I feel responsible for ensuring that we survive this pandemic and that we continue to represent the people in our community well. And so I'm dedicated to doing whatever it takes to ensure that we do right by our community. So I'm happy to be here.
Yes, go for it, DC.
I'm kind of in the Lance group in terms of like, I'm not really enjoying being a part of all the, like, who the hell am I to be a part of this? Couldn't you find someone better? That kind of thing. But what's really exciting is to be able to have conversations with people who can make change better than I, and who are willing to come in and help do that, and to help shape a new direction. I didn't think I'd be a part of something that transformative in a large organization. And that to me is pretty mind-blowing and great.
There's a saying about progress, and if you feel daunted by all that you have to do, you might be encouraged by thinking about what you've accomplished and what you've been able to accomplish. And if you start getting too full of yourself by thinking about what you've accomplished, remember what you have to do. So there's that.
I just want to add that I come from a very interesting perspective in that I am first gen, I'm an immigrant. And when I took up the mantle, I actually did not ask to head my committee or be on the board. And it's always been because someone tapped me. And I think because of that, I feel that I owe something to the community. And part of that, the tie into that is me being first gen, is that I am less tired than people who experience generational trauma. And I am tired but I am not as tired as you guys. And that also gives me blind spots sometimes that I have learned to become aware of. But it also gives me perspective on why people who don't understand might not understand, right? And both sides are allowed, and both sides have things near and dear to them that are valid. And because I am less tired, I can be the bridge. And I'm not saying that I am the bridge. I am not saying that I can speak for anyone, but I am here to facilitate the conversation. And that, I love this conversation between all of us. I don't like that we have to have it, but also it also is part of nature, right? It's part of theater that we seek out perspectives and grow together. And the nature of what we are doing right now, though, it applies specifically to the generational trauma. And so because I am less tired, I feel like I owe it to people to make that conversation happen and to help move the gauge, because honestly, no one owes anyone anything, right? You can't go to Black people, you can't go to POC, you can't go to mixed race people to say, explain to me why you're hurting. They don't owe you that. They don't owe you the solutions to the problem that was created by you, by your system. But there are people who are able to help facilitate that conversation. There are people who are able to provide that education, and it's all about finding our place in the world.
I'm like, honestly, just a moment of silence, because I literally can't speak to what all of you just brought to this room. Like how beautiful this 90-minute discussion was. And like you're saying, it was necessary, but I'm really moved. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. I wanted to say thank you so much, because it's a difficult discussion to have. Any of these are difficult discussions to have, necessary. But it's even better that we can have it. We have a platform for it. We can invite, like all of you are doing, invite everybody and more people, you know, inside of our communities into these discussions, and just make everything transparent. And I just really want to lift up Lance and Sharon, and that point that both of you made about you know, using all of this and doing all of this work to just ensure that everyone can feel normal. I have to just uplift that. And with that, I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us, for getting in here into this discussion, for just being real and unfiltered as much as we can in this moment, and really supporting each other. Because essentially, I mean, if Sharon, if we're talking about being facilitators, this is what theater does. So I really just want to thank you so much. So I just want to thank the panelists. I also want to doubly, triply, quadruply thank our fantastic interpreters who have been keeping up with us. I love all of you. Candice, Paris, Melissa, you are brilliant. You are so brilliant. And please, all of these companies are, I mean, as Aldo said, as everybody said, all right, they're getting excited outside my house. So you know that search up these companies, like search up these people, these intelligent, beautiful, fascinating people who are really, really doing the work, and communicate with them like they're trying to communicate with you. And with that, I want to thank you all. I want to close out, and I also want to give it back to Jordan Battle, who will be doing some final housekeeping and kind of concluding our event. So thank you so much.
Woo, y'all. I don't know about you, but I feel really full after this conversation. I want to say on behalf of Z Space, I want to thank Alex, DC, Lance, Becky, Sharon, Aldo, Melissa, Candice, Paris, and our beautiful moderator, Julius, for really kicking us off to what we hope is the future of Z Space and our willingness to have these difficult conversations. Thank you, Lance, for dropping those hollaback trainings in the chat. Bystander intervention training is a thing. It's free, but also make a donation. I just want to thank everyone again for coming, everyone for participating. We started off with 45 people. We didn't really start to lose people till about 5 minutes ago. So thank you so much. Just letting you know what's coming up. The next Civic conversation will be happening in June. I'm not going to quite announce what that subject is yet, but it will be in June. You'll get a follow-up email about tonight that'll also link you back to the original survey we did in case you, after hearing this, want to give more suggestions for conversation topics. And Z-Space will be participating with our partners and our friends at Aurora in their next town hall on microaggressions on April 15th at 5 p.m. as part of their Aurora Connects program. Hope to see you there. And again, thank you all so much for coming and have a good night.